I have a host of guests with me right now, and joining me, Yvonne Namai, a sports marketer. Thank you so much for joining us on Top Sport. This has always been your home for discussing sports and much more. Also, I have Solomon Alubala, a founder, the founder of Wazito FC that was in the Kenyan Premier League last season, or the National Super League, came back to the Kenyan Premier League and not quite a rosy run they have this season. We'll be talking about that and much more. Also, we have Peter Gasheru, who is a communications and a sports marketer, as well as the CEO IMG. Thank you so much for joining us right now. We also have Jos Openda, head coach with Blazers, formerly Telcom, and he will be telling us how success has been something that he sleeps and drinks every season, every year in, year out. And we were to have Angela Murigi, who could not make it. And so the discussion goes on right now. Angela Murigi, KCB Marketing Director there. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Karibuni sana. We started off. Money is an issue. It is a factor for success in sports. It is something that, yes, we go looking for success, but then without the boost for funding, we never get it right, despite the talents that we have. Yvonne, just take us through. Where do we start from the start? Where do we get it wrong?
Actually, my opening statement in time somebody engages me with regard to sponsorship in sport, after listening to most people, especially in Kenya, all of them always open with the same line. If I had certain amount of money, then I'd be able to do X, Y, Z. And my immediate response is usually, if money is your only problem, then you have more problems than you actually think you have. I think it's we need a mindset shift, because there's so many boxes that you need to tick as a sports entity before you come to the sponsorship bit. There's so many internal avenues of revenue generation within clubs and sports federations that need to be taken care of, which are just basically the fundamentals before we come into the sponsorship league. So without taking so much time from my fellow panelists, I would make reference to the most followed league in the world, the English Premier League. By the time it was being formed in 1992, after over a decade of existence, they ticked a few things right. The few things they ticked before they were coming together to decide to form a limited company were actually getting communities to rally behind the teams, getting a system where when you come into the system, you start from the bottom, you aim to make team 2, you aim to make team 1, and the football was taken care of first. So I think for me, my opening statement would be that the mindset needs to be right. You're first a sports institution before becoming a business institution. So you need to take care of the fundamentals of the sport first.
All right, I want us to also have our opening statement, but before that, sponsorship, our sports entities lacking so much in that area so far that they haven't, not much of the sports entities in the country have secured a worthwhile sponsorship that we've been having. And as you said, yes, the targets is what they're getting it wrong. And as I bring in Solomon, you are the founder of Wazito FC. So far, budgets are an issue as well. It is something that will attract what you do and the talents that you have from your squad. Perhaps, what do you make of it? Sponsorship and sports.
What has been happening actually traditionally in Kenyan football and sports in general has been that we rely so much on sponsorship. Perhaps my view is we need to look at it from a different point of view. We need to look at the whole structure. The question is, how is our structure supporting us to get more revenues from a question of raising capital all the way now to sponsorship. As it is, we are running a society model for clubs and federation. And in my opinion, that's limiting because you can't raise funds from funds. You are unable to actually raise capital, for instance, on the stock market. So perhaps the starting point to me is actually looking at the structure that we have. And this goes to the Sports Act. We need to have a conversation around changing the laws so that we change the structures for our sports institution to enable them to raise funds.
All right, as you say that a lot still needs to be changed in terms of also the laws. But then again, Peter, as I bring you in this, as a sponsor, let me call them a sponsor, but as an investor, perhaps you are seeking to invest on a given club. What are you looking at? success is success the only thing?
I think one of the things that we encounter on a daily basis in our day-to-day business is the gap between what the right holders are, the owners of the clubs have, and basically what the corporate potential sponsors are there. Because the sponsors are there, it's only that the product, there seems to be a gap and they can't meet the two. So my first take would be, number one, clubs, federations need to move away from donations. We need to move away completely from a donation mentality. The minute you see a rights holder referring to his budget, he's already on a donation format. He's saying, you know, I want to buy this and this, and he's talking about somebody to fund his budget. He's already on the wrong path. What they need to do basically is say, I have this product that we've developed, and when you approach a corporate, basically you're saying, this is what I have to offer. They're actually coming to the corporate and saying, I have something to offer you in return for your investment.
All right.
You are not, tusaidia tafadhali, we have talented players to take somewhere. The corporates will not tell you on the face, but it does not go anywhere near the objectives for that year.
All right. And in one of your writings in your medium, you say that there are different budgets that one can look at when they're trying to attract a sponsor. Perhaps expand on that.
Yes, when you go to our typical corporates, basically, they have a number of budgets, budget lines. One of them, and the one that we often go for, is a marketing budget. And in this budget, basically, you know that it is to grow the sales of an organization. The company is interested in growing its bottom line, and it has put aside some money to market and to reach people. The other budgets that corporates have, they might even have CSR budgets, which have a complete different return on investment. They could be health related, they could be youth development related, and this might be more flexible in terms of their ROI. And the others, we might even have a staff welfare budget. And in fact, we were just having a conversation with the coach earlier. A lot of our sports came from staff welfare budgets. The teams that were owned by corporates in the 70s and 80s ran off staff welfare budgets. Of course, now things are getting tighter. Yeah. So when you're approaching a sponsor, you basically are offering them a solution in one of the three areas that you actually know that they actually have a budget.
All right.
Yeah.
As I bring in Joseph Penda, successful coach with Telkom, our Blazers, formerly Telkom, and currently no more Telkom, but we have Blazers so far. And you've been successful. Currently, you're also leading and already won the 2019 season for the Kenya Hockey Union women's title already without a sponsor. And the journey has been well. 30 years of sponsorship with Telkom, but then that lapsed after the partnership was broken by Telkom. So far, the journey has been okay. But then how do you now move from here?
That's the problem we have now. And I'm happy to hear what the panelists are also saying here about the money factor. I look at the money and I look at it like my slave. It does my work. It helps us do the work that we want done. Right. When you look at Telkom, when Telkom had us, especially Telkom Orange, if I may talk about Telkom Orange before it moved to Telkom Kenya, Telkom Orange, there's a time the CEO, Lobry, called me to his office and he showed me a newspaper headline. He told me, look here, you're doing great things for me. Front page here is a big headline about negative things about Telkom. When I turn the back page, I smile. I smile, and you make me happy. And I want to assure you that we'll continue sponsoring you so that you can make us happy on this back page. Now we've reached a point where that's no more. And we are trying to learn. It's unfamiliar territory for us. I'll not say that it's something that we're used to. We've been gotten off our comfort zone, if I may say so. Because what we do is send a budget, like it's being said, send a budget to Telkom, list the things that we need, and you know what they do? They facilitate and they make sure that we have everything. Now here we are, as Blazers. A lot needs to be done. Club Champs is coming up in a week's time. Nothing to show of us going over. Now, if I may do the things that the panel is saying that we don't do, let me plead again to somebody to come on board and just help us get to the club championship and do something,
All right, Peter and Yvonne, just as I bring you in this, as maybe I'm looking for a sponsor or an investor and I'm looking to impress. Yes, I'm successful in terms of my work in the field, in different federations as well. I have a good record, as he says, with Telkom or hockey team. But then, is that enough to convince a sponsor? Is that enough so that at least, yes, his name will be there, Telkom won, Blazers won, but then what is his return on investment?
Just to pick up from where Peter was trying to get into, half, if not 100% of the people that you're going to meet in boardrooms of corporations do not understand and do not care about your sport. They care ultimately how they're getting more people to uptake their products, how they're getting the existing customers to stay and continuously choose them. Marketing, in essence, is all about coercing somebody to choose you, to pick you as a product. So sports marketing, in essence, comes with already made emotions, you know, because marketing in itself is all about manipulating emotions so that somebody can choose you. Sports marketing taps into, it's like having a focus group to test your product. Sports marketing is already coming with passion. People are already passionate with it. So from a sports entity, as a sports rights holder, you should find what would make this other person on the other end of the table be interested in you. Return on investment doesn't necessarily have to be tangible, where people come to watch my games in my sports and use that product. Doesn't necessarily have to be tangible. We have the most common thing being brand positioning, top of mind awareness. So in your sport already, what will you give the person in the boardroom an opportunity to engage not only the existing customers, but their potential customers? So sports rights holders need to understand that their conversation needs to change from I am here to plead for this to I am offering a platform for you to engage your existing customer and you do your homework. When you come to talk to me as Yvonne and you come to talk to Peter, we are two different people. Our interests are totally different. So do your homework. Don't show up with your titles because I don't care your titles. You know, they don't give money to my business.
All right. Peter, we'll be coming out to you to tell me how. Like, what are these things that I should do? Yes, you'll have your logo there. Yes, you'll have this success and the titles. But then, what are these things that I should show? When we were behind the cameras, there was a very good discussion going on about what they're doing wrong. And something that I noted so far is that, yes, you may be successful, as they said, you can be successful, but the PR people or the investor wants numbers. Peter, we've seen the Tuskys 10-kilometer run. You mentioned something there about the numbers. Please.
Well, I mean, it's a show that is going on right now, and I think they've done well to sponsor that run.
All right.
But you can see they've been very deliberate by moving the venue to where it's going to speak to one of their outlets. Clearly, they want to drive awareness onto this outlet and drive footfall. And that's basically what you do to attract a sponsor like that, because at the end of the day, Tuskys has a bottom line to meet. And when right holders like Coach come to us, we sit with them and first of all do something we call an asset audit. And what we do is just see what are the assets that they actually have, because sometimes to the coach and to the people who run sports, sometimes it's not very clear. As he mentioned earlier, that they were doing headlines on the sports pages, but for him that was just about winning and what they do to get publicity. But to the sponsor on the other end, it was about getting their brand image being reflected in a different light. So when you would be approaching their next sponsor, they should be talking about the brand image as opposed to actually what they need. So we've had occasions where some smaller football teams have come to me and I've told them, what are the big corporates within your area that you think you can approach? And we've looked at issues like, do they have a CSR? Can they use your players to visit a children's home? Because then that will elevate their stakeholder relationship within that community. Then you're helping them. Can they use your players to do a clinic, a coaching clinic? So it's not just using the players who are going to play in the National League.
All right.
But how can those players be used by this corporate in their CSR activities. And the corporate at that time would be saying, I need to be good with my neighbors. This is the community where I get most of my workers from. How do I improve our relationship? A club can be such an avenue where you can use. So some of the assets that the teams have are not as obvious.
Yeah.
And therefore we help them package this and price them, not according to their budget, but according to the corporate budget. Completely different.
And that swiftly brings in the matter of numbers vis-a-vis success or not quite successful. And before I come to Solomon, Yvonne, Gor Mahia, FC Leopards, they have the numbers. Manchester United, Manchester City, they have a big following. They've been successful. But then for a sponsor, yes, success is one thing. But then I'm looking at numbers. How are Gor Mahia and FC Leopards not tapping into that?
The biggest problem these two clubs have is that they will talk about the numbers. It's good to make political declarations to make yourself feel well. Yeah, it's good to talk about all the titles you've won. Okay. But at the end of the day, when I'm balancing my books to justify the investment into this club, I want to see the numbers. What are you showing me? Are you showing me membership numbers for members who've paid? Because no matter how many stadiums you fill, when you come back to the drawing board and it's money, hard-earned money from my business, I will want to see why I should choose you and not Sofa Paka, you know, or not Wazito, yeah? So at the end of the day, we need to come out of this shell where we think one person can do everything, and it's a discussion we've been having on how roles need to be greatly identified. In the current system that we have in our clubs and federations, we have a huge political influence into the operations of the club. And we have instances where we have very successful coaches, like my fellow panelists here, looking for sponsorship on behalf of the club. It is not their job. The politicians should do the politicking. And the administrators and the operations guys should ensure that the technical needs are being met. I will give you a very good example of where it's not about the trophies. Kenya's biggest communications company, Safaricom, is running a football program called Chapa Dimba na Safaricom. All of us here cannot name anyone who is playing in that league. We can try, but I do not know one single person who is playing in Chapa Dimba and Safaricom. I will follow Chapa Dimba, it will be trending, yeah? But Peter, my fellow marketer, said something very important which people forget. When businesses reach a certain point in their success, they have to come back to the person who got them there. And that's the very basic strategy of Chapa Dimba and Safaricom. It's got nothing to do with the success of those teams.
All right, Solomon, Wazito FC used one or two of these insights that we're getting here to attract a sponsor, that you currently have a sponsor. And at least the team, yes, funding is not an issue, but then returning that to the sponsor and bringing in some success is something also tricky to them so far.
One of the things I think we've done over the years actually is to come up with a value proposition. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why you've had a foreign investor coming in. He's actually an investor, yes.
All right.
That's Ricardo Badoa.
Yep.
But just coming back to the discussion, I think there's a disconnect when it comes to funds. I'm looking at the big two clubs perhaps in Kenya. And that sends me back to the actual structure that we have. For example, at the moment, you find that the funds don't really feel ownership. You leave the management to actually look for sponsorship. Then if you look at it from a structural point of view, you have a chairman, secretary, and then you have a treasurer. That's what the prescription is. Now, you see, you need perhaps to delegate this role to a marketing agency, in this case, or a PR agency, to actually help you package so that you actually brand yourself. It's a question of how do you develop a brand. It takes time, and it doesn't really matter. I think if you look at the last few weeks, we've not been performing well, but I think we are trending. So that tells you that there's something happening behind the scenes. So yes, it's true, from what my colleague has just said, we need to differentiate roles. There are the people who are good in coaching, you are good in the politics, and there's a separation in terms of the marketing aspect For instance, I think right now KPL should be having a serious marketing entity, and just like EPL, every other day there's an advertisement about EPL. There are programs running on the telly, and that's the reason why we have a huge following for it. But on our side, we are a bit silent, and we just expect, okay, fine, maybe FC Leopards is playing Ulinzi. We only hear it on news.
All right. And it brings us to the fact about numbers, the fans. And the only way to attract the fans is by having success. But then success is not also one thing that is being looked at by the investor. I'll be coming to Peter just shortly to tell me, yes, about the fans, what can attract the fans so that the sponsor can see that in this, there are numbers. Yes, what are the sponsors now looking at in terms of the fans? And the only way we have Gor Mahia, we have AFC Leopards, we have teams, we have federations, Football Kenya Federation, Hockey Union Federation. And one thing that is across board in the previous interactions that we've been having, Peter, is the fact about management. Management has been an issue. And with poor management, we'll be having embezzlement of funds, we'll be having issues of funding that have been used wrongly. And at the end of the day, the sponsor will back away because the management is wrong. Issues on management. What are we doing wrong so far in terms of management so that we can attract the sponsors?
Well, the management issue is always a very tricky one. But I mean, I've served in the Federation Square for quite a long time myself, and we've seen us thinking that the Sports Act is going to come and solve the problem. But we need to start asking ourselves simple questions like, who owns the federations? Who are the federations? And who are they then answerable to? The government has a serious role to play there, but currently the direction that the Sports Act took, I don't believe that there was full inclusivity in the results that we expected. We've seen Sports Act from other countries really taking a different direction. Federations run the sports as volunteers on behalf of Kenyans. But sometimes you find that they seem to have been made to be some kind of special animal. We throw stones at all the time. Government is a different and the public is on the other side. So we need to actually say who are federations and what's their role. And government needs to put in, and this actually boils down to the question that I know would be following up over this, is if government does not come into federations, it eventually affects sponsorship. And this is the way I see it. Sports is entertainment. When I go home today, I'm going to have my remote control and I'll have choices of what I can actually flip to. As much as I want to watch a local football match or a local hockey match, if it's not entertaining, I'll switch to something else. How does this game become entertaining? The only way it becomes entertaining is because there was investment at the grassroots. There needs to be proper investment at the grassroots, and we cannot expect sponsors to actually invest at that level. That has to be purely government. So government needs to come into sponsor and help, to the federations to help bring up the level of our sports so that we can get attracted. We were just watching what was happening on volleyball now at Kasarani. It's empty. It's a league match. I'm sure they're not even charging a gate fee. It's only a 5,000 seater. How are you going to attract sponsors to a game that has no spectators? So government needs to come in, help us improve or develop our talent to the level that will not drive the die-hard fans. He told me there are 200 people at City Park today watching hockey. Those are die-hard fans. I want to take it to the level where a housewife will want to go and watch, because we know housewives are watching the Premiership. But they will not go and watch the local league because it's not as entertaining. So we need to bring it to that level so that we actually have numbers. The other burden goes to media houses. Media houses have to televise it, and it has to be quality. Sometimes you're trying to watch a local match, a local run, and you can't follow it because it's not televised in a professional way. And we know this is an expensive thing. And then finally to the federations is presentation. How is a game presented? Is it presented in a professional way? The volleyball we were watching there were guys warming up behind the camera. That's not right. If you remember 2007 when we had the IAAF under 18, one of the things that people said, it looked very good on television. And because the presentation, IAAF maintains its standard globally to be the same, even when it was Kasarani, it was at a level, so when you watch it on television, you could actually see it and it was kind to your eyes and entertaining, and you could watch. And hence, the money follows.
All right, and coach, you've gotten that. Success, it's only the thing. The numbers, yes, you may be having them, but then again, how do you write your proposal? I know right now you're in the process of drafting 1 or 2 proposals to a few entities that you've had contacts with. What is it that you're putting there before them? You mentioned something when we were at the break.
What you're putting in, I've seen was totally wrong. We are putting in budget lines, and we are not really communicating to the people, to them, like, how they can be part of us. We are looking at ourselves only and selling ourselves. Now, what we are going to do now is from what I've learned from the panel here, and I'm 100% sure that I'll interact more with them. I'm going to get their contact. We are going to go a notch higher, because for next season, we have to be ready. Club champs, I know it's tricky, but now I'm just pleading now. Anybody wants their brand name to be promoted during the club championship can come ahead. We can go with your name, and rest assured we are going to win. There's no doubt about it. So your name will be there, us, together with us as Blazers. On the same note, we're also doing something which I've heard you people talk about. We are about separation of work duties. Now what you're going to do is this. We already, as Blazers, we are forming a committee that's going to run the club. We are going to have the Kawaida chairman, secretary, all these things. Then on top of that, I'm going to have a fundraising committee. Not people who play hockey, but at least people from outside who understand. Like, I believe that 2 of them will be part of my committee. Okay.
All right, Yvonne, as we go towards concluding all this and go to Eldot, Sports Fund has come in. You've had, he's talked about bringing the brand name. Is that enough to have my brand as a team, and then that will convince me to bring in money, and that at the end of the day, also on Sports Fund?
Just to comment on his comments, he's speaking as a coach. He has an immediate need of ensuring the team on as a fixture. So you can't actually blame him for putting it like that. When it comes to the Sports Fund, I'll pick up from where Peter mentioned. One thing that we refuse to acknowledge is that for all the sporting nations that actually have people who call themselves professional athletes who get paid to play, there's been a huge involvement of the government from the onset. I think the huge disconnect here is that it could be lack of knowledge from our government in terms of how, or rather which role that they play in terms of sporting success. If you look at all the documents that we have, all the committees that have been raised in the name of trying to help sports, none of them is addressing a Kenyan issues. All of them table papers that are not relevant to the Kenyan scenario. We even had the embarrassing situation where we had a Kenyan delegation come and copy-paste a report.
Yeah.
And they went to the event,
But then isn't it?
So I was part of delivering the Africa Cup of Nations this year. And there's a huge difference when you want to benchmark in readiness for hosting sports events. It means you're there before the event. I didn't watch any game. All of us were working. I can't remember who was playing when. Because when you benchmark specifically for the role of sports management, most of the work we do before the competition begins. Right. I would have, a better scenario would have been our Ministry of Congratulations, instead of coming and gracing Kenya Games, would have been to get to know how Egypt got to host the event after being awarded the event 3 months before the event. All right. So I think the Sports Fund, all these are really good ideas. We have, I think, 5 different arms of government within the Sports Ministry which are supposed to help sports. Yeah. But none of them has actually engaged the stakeholders that face all these challenges, where a coach has to do a managerial job and works on budgets and still has to win trophies. So there's a disparity there. And still the Sports Fund only take care of the national team, leaving out the clubs being at Wazito. You'd wish for it to come down to the clubs as well.
In the situation that we are in, I think it's important for us to perhaps, because you see, you've developed this Sports Fund, And the money that is actually being derived from this, I'm just saying, you know, it's coming from sports. For instance, betting. People bet, and they're actually betting on sports. So my argument is we just need to use the same money actually to develop the same sport. And I would like us to take a different approach when you're talking about development of sports. You're not only just talking about funding the budgets that are existing. We need to seriously look at the marketing bit of it, because if we get these funds to get to develop this sport from a marketing point of view, we'll get more funds perhaps getting into stadiums, then the corporates will come in. I still also think we need to seriously think about how to implement the question of the tax rebates as well for corporates. We need something that is deliberate, because we're in a situation whereby there's a clear disconnect between the corporates, and the only time perhaps you find corporates are actually looking at it from a marketing, purely marketing point of view. But we need to force it so that we actually start developing, because if you look at our clubs, they don't even have academies and all that. So we need to actually get into prescription where we'll force corporates to come in.
All right, I want us to conclude this discussion before now we go to Elder. Just conclude this. And as we conclude and say, yes, success, yes, numbers, yes, the brand growth and everything else as a management as well. Just as a sum up for all this, one word each. They need to succeed in their federations. They need to succeed in their management. They also need to succeed in everything as we bring in sponsors and attract them. Change one or two things.
The socio-economic impact of sports can only be realized by a government who is aware of the role that they can play to develop the sport. The sport is anchored on what we call the player development pathway. When I build an academy, where is this player going to play? In Nairobi alone, we have over 45 registered football academies. But our Premier League teams playing in the Kenya Premier League cannot raise under 23 teams, under 17 teams, under 13 teams. So what are these academies for? So I think for me, my parting shot is that for the sports rights holders, they need to package and prepare the player development pathway that they require in their own sports. And our government needs to actually engage the people who are in the day-to-day running. That makes work for us as sports marketers a little bit easier, because the knowledge is out there, and we are at par when we're talking about the business of sport.
All right. As a club, we ourselves need to change what?
I think let me first of all go to the government.
Briefly,
I think we need to look at the Sports Act, because if we change the Sports Act, we need to force people to actually have good governance structures within the clubs. Two, it will open up avenues to actually raise capital in different forums, private placement, foreign investment, and maybe in the stock exchange. So and then the third thing I think that will happen is, from the Sports Act as well, it will force perhaps government involvement in terms of funding. From a club level point of view, it's just a question of professionalizing. Unfortunately, we're in a situation whereby for the young clubs, we're in a situation whereby at the moment, there's already a perception from corporates that there's lack of professionalism from actually the clubs. So we need to change this narrative and ensure that actually we behave in a more professional way.
All right. Professionalizing it will help through?
Yeah, definitely. I think we need to have a good split between where we need to fund development and the elite.
Okay.
We've had a lot of talk about, for example, Harambee Stars being given, was it 50 million for winning something? Was it last year?
Yeah,
something like that.
For qualifying for
For qualifying.
AFCON, yeah.
And for me, that is 50 million, too late. Because, sorry to say, if the team is where it is, there's very little you can do with 50 million within a year or few months to a match. We need to actually look and say, why are there no people in the stadiums for our Premier League? Other than when those two big players play, the stadiums are empty. So what is it? And for me, it's a quality of soccer that we have. And that cuts across all sports. So I know we have many academies. My suggestion is that we close all those academies, all of them. Take that fund to primary schools. We have 34,000 primary schools in our country.
We used to contribute 150 shillings. For
Yes, we used to contribute 100 and
I know, it's good.
yes, we used to contribute 150, and that was good for primary school sport. But if you remember, in the 80s, the government then discontinued it,
Yeah.
and with that one stroke, they killed primary school sports.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we actually met sports in secondary schools when it's again too late.
Yeah.
So when we start talking in the public about sending teams, we are seeing people being stranded, but these are teams that are, sorry to say, are not going anywhere. Let's put this money back to primary school,
Yeah.
Okay.
have third level, fourth level coaches. He could, for example, be in charge of like 20 coaches at primary schools.
Okay.
By the time they get to Form 1, you are getting hockey players at another level.
Yes.
And then we'll start seeing people, I'll pay to go to a stadium. Then if I'm paying to go to a stadium,
All right.
the sponsor will follow. You don't even need to ask. He'll
Okay.
follow.
Okay, thank you so much, Peter. And Jos, it is not about the success. It is not only about going to brand.
Yeah, it's not about that, but for now I can say we'll still stay with the old rule. I'll still plead. Beginning next year, we're going to start on a different note. Because you see what's happening now. Why I'm saying that is because where we are now, we only have a week to the tournament. And we'll try and do things differently, but a week to the tournament, like we are Nairobi Club. And Nairobi Club, I believe the governor of Nairobi should come and support a Nairobi club. So I'm pleading to Mike Sonko, come to your team, come and watch your team win the club champs. Let's celebrate as Nairobi, that a team from Nairobi went for the Africa Club Championship and won it, and you know, we celebrate together.
Okay.
But I'm happy about what I've learned from the technocrats here, and I believe that from here, things will be different.
Go change the proposal that you had started writing, I suppose. All right, indeed. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for the candid discussion. And